the Q&A sessions. Because of time, we're running late. And if all of us are to introduce ourselves, then we will take a long time because we have about 64 people online. But for us who are here and even on the online presence, what we'll require is that during the Q&A session, we can, of course, introduce ourselves. But I want to take this opportunity to once again welcome all of you for this event. As the moderator, I take this opportunity to welcome the Ministry of ICT representative representing the Permanent Secretary, who was supposed to be here with us, but because of engagement has sent a representative. I also want to take this opportunity to thank our board members who have come to be part of this event. We have our board chair here with us, Honorable Kabajo, and then we have Dr. Annabella and Dr. Richard Otete. So thank you for coming, and all protocol observed. Thank you for coming for this event. Now, of course, as I already highlighted, the exercise today or the event this morning is to disseminate the findings of the National IT Survey, which we conducted right from last year, and we concluded it this year in May. And the report, as you saw, was many of us received these reports. We have a link which we shared with all the participants. And just in case you didn't get the report, we have it on on the NITAU website. So please, you can go there and get this information and of course take advantage of this information. So thank you for coming at this time. I want us to rise up on our feet and let's have the national anthem, the Ugandan first, and then the East African. So are we ready? Let's rise up on our feet.
Oh, Uganda, we lay our future in thy hands. United, free for liberty, together we always stand. Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu, jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu.
Thank you. Let's take our seats. And now, of course, our ED, Dr. Hatwib Mugasa, is also on assignment and couldn't be here with us, but he has given me full blessing to come this morning and, of course, stand before you. We don't take it for granted. The National IT Authority, as you're aware, is under the Ministry of ICT. We are an agency under the Ministry of ICT. And together with the ministry, we conducted the National IT Survey. Of course, this is the third survey that we are doing. The first survey was the e-government readiness assessment that was done in 2012-2013. Of course, it gave us areas where the government needed to put focus on. The second National IT Survey was also conducted in 2018, and all these reports are on our website. And also, it gave us it gave us areas as government where focus should be put in order to digitize our country. We want to thank the Ministry of ICT for the continuous guidance. As an agency under the ministry, we are delighted this morning again to have the ministry represented here. We are also grateful for the respective government agencies that have participated in this survey, because one of the things that we all have a challenge with is the issues of data. Data is very key as we move to digitize this country. We need data. We need to make decisions from an informed point of view. As we plan, we need to have information to guide our planning. And so what we did through this third survey was basically also to assess how far we've come, where are the gaps, what can we focus on, what are the low-hanging fruits, where are we as a country. So this survey was, of course, conducted to assess and collect data related to availability of ICTs, access, usage, and where we are as a country. And of course, we, as a country, we're also required to provide this information that will help some of the international bodies like the UN when they're rating us. Where do they find this information? So this survey provides input to some of those the international surveys, and of course, which gives, and if as a country we don't have this information, then we can be rated in any other way. So we took it upon ourselves as a sector to continuously undertake these assignments, just to show us where we are as a country, what are the gaps, and what can we do, and what can we prioritize. And also, maybe from the private sector point of view and government, what are the opportunities for us to leverage on to digitize our country? As a matter of fact, the world is going digital, and as a country, we must put focus in specific areas, the areas of infrastructure, the areas of e-services, to create efficiency in the delivery of services to our citizens. And the findings of this report today will, of course, show us what we still need to do, where we are, and the opportunities that are there within the ICT sector that each one of us can take advantage of in digitizing our country. In the report, if you had a look at the report provides, it's very comprehensive. It's very comprehensive. We have indicators covering ministries, departments, and agencies. We also looked at the district local governments, the households, the individuals, and the businesses. Of course, not forgetting the business process outsourcing, of course, which provides opportunities for job creation in our country. Also, the report, what we are going to see today is that the report also highlights, presents key findings at national level, rural and urban level, and of course, the regional levels in comparison with the previous survey that was done in 2018. And this will go a long way in helping us as a sector, but also in our respective operational environments. What can we do better in government, in local governments, at household level, across businesses? Where can we support one another in terms of digitization? And of course, for us as a sector and government, in terms of decision making and policy. So this is very critical in our planning. So this is what we've come to do this morning, and I take this opportunity once again to welcome each and every one of you here, and for supporting us, giving us this information. Actually, Actually, the success rate will be presented. Several government entities, if not almost 80%, participated and gave us this information, which we actually managed to put together into this final report. So let's clap for ourselves. So thank you. I don't have much to say. Allow me at this time, without any much ado, because we are running late, to invite the presenter. We have Dr. Tusubira here from Knowledge Consults, who undertook this assignment on behalf of NITA, together with NITA and the Ministry of ICT and the other agencies within the sector. So I invite you at this time to present, and then note those areas. Time will come when we shall, of course, share some insights, question and answer sessions. So thank you. You're welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Richard. My colleague, Michael Chero, represent the Permanent Secretary, my colleagues, members of the board of NITAU, and everybody within this sector. I am not going to make the presentation. My colleague Ali will. I just want to salute and recognize the opportunity of working with NITAU in really collecting data so that we can utilize more evidence-based policy and strategy. We have been trying to drive Uganda for a long time, going away from simply guessing, because evidence-based policy is the only thing that can get us to real success. We want to face challenges as they are. I want to recognize the colleagues with whom we worked in our team. We have got Dr. Ruth Nsivirano online in gender issues. We had the Dr. Abraham Yeyo, who is a statistician. We have got Mr. Ali Ndualana, who actually heads our surveys department, who will therefore be making the presentation, and I am the leader of the team. So thank you for the opportunity. I should mention even before it comes that this survey is nationally representative, which means that the sample design working with UBOS was designed to ensure that it is nationally representative. It cannot be reduced to a locality because the data for a locality is not sufficient. It gives the national picture. Secondly, we did look at the business process outsourcing. That one was not nationally representative because it was specific to a group of companies that is supported by NITAU. And therefore, with those few words, I want to invite my colleague Ali to take us through the presentation. And you know, as you grow, you need to start stepping back and let the younger people take over some of this talking. So Ali, please talk to your age mates. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tusu, and others who made the opening remarks. My job is simple. We can dive right in. Yeah, there is at the bottom of that, at the screen, that URL is just a shortened URL. That's the link to the actual report that they mentioned. So if you could copy, just shorten, so it makes it much easier for you to copy if you want to download a copy of the report. Wi-Fi, I think I tried the caps, they didn't work. When I tried the lowercase ones, that worked. So if you want to download a copy of the report right away, you can actually do that. That's right on the NITA website. Our presentation outline, these are the areas that we are going to cover. We'll briefly go through the purpose, but that's been covered very ably by Richard from NITAU. We will highlight the key findings, talk a little bit about the design, and then we will delve into some of the details in some of the major categories of the survey. Then we'll have some discussion at the end of this exercise. In terms of the purpose, this has already been highlighted by Richard. So we wanted to be able to understand access to ICT or IT across a range of categories of users. So we covered the MDAs, the local governments, households and individuals, as well as businesses. And as Tusu pointed out, under the businesses, there was a general focus on BPO or business process outsourcing, YT-enabled services, because that's one of the areas that the ministry and her agencies want to focus on. It's national representative, so the data can be disaggregated in a number of ways by age, by gender, income levels, localities, in terms of rural, urban, because policymakers usually like that to be able to make sure that no one is being left behind. Tusu has briefly talked about the team. Maybe just to highlight that in terms of the other collaborating team from government, of course, Richard, who made the opening remarks here, was lead in terms of the technical team, supported by Gloria Kansime, seated right in that corner there. So let's delve into some of the key findings so that we can be able to understand what are the highlights in terms of findings. So very quickly, when you look at MDAs, that's the ministries, departments, and agencies, the proportion of staff that routinely use a computer for their work purposes or that access the internet at work for work purposes has seen some improvements. So in essence, it reflects that there's some improvement, but it's not yet even 100% when you look at government agencies. So growth is about 37 to 61% when you're talking about routinely using a computer for work, whereas internet access has greatly improved from about 23% to 65% in terms of, if you compare this version of the survey to the last edition that Richard talked about from 2017-2018. NITA-U is still the dominant, when you talk about MDAs, NITA is the dominant ISP, internet service provider. It covers most of the MDAs and most of them have connections via fiber, but they're still concerned about the issue of cost. So, the cost of internet remains a major challenge. And I think recently the Minister of ICT and National Guidance announced that the price that NITA provides bandwidth to government MDAs is going to go down. And believe me, when that happens, even some of us who may not necessarily be part of government will actually see the results because it kind of influences what happens in the private sector. There's a challenge of sharing information or data sharing across government agencies. So yes, MD has indicated quite some interest in using shared platforms, that's shared systems. But when it comes to sharing data, even across government agencies, we still have some challenges. And it's brought on by both cultural and operational barriers in terms of whether there are policies that don't allow inter or intra-government MDAs to be able to share data. So this is something that actually needs to be urgently addressed. The other issue, of course, is around security. So as we get most of our services online, then the issue of security becomes paramount. For some of you may have recently had National Water talk about their systems being hacked and going offline and not be able to generate bills and things like that. These are going to become more and more common because security is of importance. I think about 59% of the MDAs reported having experienced some type of IT security incident in the previous 12 months. And remember, this is self-reported, but even when we report, these are the incidences that we have detected. So there may even be others that happen, and you continue going on with life as normal because you don't know that somebody came in and actually did take some data. So there's need to increase security awareness, not only among MDAs, but generally local governments, even among individuals, because this is becoming important. MDAs, access to computers and as well as internet is still rather low. And given their the critical part that local governments serve in terms of delivering service, this is an area we are going to have to figure out how to address, because even if the MDAs use a lot of computers and the internet, and we do not provide this capacity to the local government that actually do the last mile, then we are going to still have a gap. And therefore, this is an area that government kind of needs to figure out how to address. Government has a goal to extend fiber to all the district headquarters, but it hasn't gotten there yet, even at the level of the district headquarters. So, about 72% of local governments indicated having internet access, but this is, somebody has a modem, others use their phones as the modems and aspects like that. So that number looks, it may look surprising to some people as rather high, but it encompasses all types of access. And so when we talk about extending fiber to all district headquarters as a priority, I think recently, Nita, you also concluded a study on the National Broadband Baseline Study and Infrastructure Blueprint. And I think that can actually can be used as one of the bases that provides a good roadmap for the country on how to be able to connect the country to the national backbone right down to the sub-county level. Security is still an issue as well for the local governments, just like we mentioned with MDAs. At the business level, the focus here was on businesses that are formal by the definition of WUBOS. So we would look at businesses that have at least 9 to 10 employees. They have been around for at least 2 to 3 years and so on. So this doesn't necessarily capture the picture of all small businesses as you might think about them. About 1 in 3 business employees routinely use the internet at work, but closely matching, the staff that used computers at work. 1 in 2 talked about having internet access. Again, this is varied. They could have an ISP, they could have their own modem, they could talk about using internet on their phones and so on and so forth. But websites weren't as many. Businesses with internet access, if you looked at those with internet access, about 58 had received orders online, and this includes all sorts of things, whether somebody sends them an email or somebody does WhatsApp, as long as it's something that basically uses the internet, then they reflected or captured that. One of the challenges, though, is payments as well as the delivery logistics. So in essence, right now, people can order something and then they can pay for it using mobile money, but then somebody still has got to walk and come and get to the shop in order to be able to pick it up. Or in some rare instances, people have found borders. So you basically send a border to go and deliver something. So the delivery logistics are still an issue. And of course, that would go down to issues too, like addressing and being able to pinpoint. So if I say I am located in Tula, where exactly in Tula are you? Are you in Kawempe? Are you in Perere? And those kinds of issues. So the addressing, national addressing, postal addressing systems come into play. I wanted to quickly highlight specific point of interest, both government as NITA. I think somebody's mic is on. I don't know which is, like, hear some throwback, but yeah, so we paid some special attention to them in the sense that we had a separate instrument or tool questionnaire dedicated to them. And then there's also a small sub-report, which is also accessible on the same link that covers that. Interestingly, a lot of the bulk of the work that they do is sourced or generated locally. But the biggest challenge that these businesses identified was the unwillingness of domestic customers to be able to use their services. So essentially, that basically reflects some kind of unmet demand. And, government is, as the biggest employer, can actually also be a big customer. So figuring out ways in which government can actually unlock the potential to outsource more of its own work to the BPO sector would actually be critical in helping this sector grow, given our aspirations that it can be one of the avenues that we can use to engage a lot of these youth that are coming up and that are already digitally savvy. Internet connectivity is still considered a challenge. So 1 in every 2 BPOs actually indicated that they had insufficient bandwidth to do their own work. So interestingly, discussing with our collaborators that we were working with, NITA has already identified the BPO sector as a target user group. So they try to provide subsidized internet, but this has been are only directed towards those people that are near the NBI or the National Broadband Network. So if you are a BPO, but you are far away, you are not near a node, these kinds of opportunities were not available. And one of the recommendations we actually make is NITA and government to basically look into extending this to all qualifying entities, whether or not they are near or irrespective of their location relative to the NBI. About half also talked about, the kind of, you asked them questions about the kind of capabilities you think they need to develop in order to be relevant in the next 5 to 10 years. And they identified things like, data analytics, data management, and areas. These are some of the areas in which we need to figure out how to nurture local capacity or capabilities in order to be able to be relevant. Just giving you a quick overview in terms of what the survey, how the survey was designed and organized. So at different levels. So for example, when we look at MDAs, the data we provide really is at a national level. We didn't sample, we reached all MDAs and asked them to give us data. Response rate was, I think, something about 90-something% in terms of the response that we got back. Local governments, again, that was at a national level. Households and individuals, we can do national level. We can also do sub-regions. UBOS has a way it divides the country into regions, which are not just the main 4 that we know, east, west, central, but they actually go into smaller subdivisions, ending up with about 15 sub-regions. You can still also get data at that level. Location, rural, urban, gender, male, female, the data can give us, representative data at those levels. And businesses, it's national level as well. So we collected all the data electronically using tablets and ODK, as some of you might be aware, so that as soon as the teams were in the field and they submitted a questionnaire, the team would immediately receive it and be able to guide enumerators where there were issues. And at the bottom there, we kind of show the numbers that we are talking about in terms of coverage for each of those different categories. So let's dive into some of the key findings in some of the different categories that we are interested in. So when you look at the MDAs, about 22% of these were government ministries, about 70% were government agencies, and then there were others that are departments, so classified themselves as departments. So there's a tree in there that kind of just summarizes some of the key findings. So for example, all government MDAs actually report access to the internet. But when you look at the proportion of the employees that routinely use the computer for work, it's about 64.7%. Yes, they could argue that there are categories of staff that don't need to be using the internet, but I'm sure those numbers can actually get improved. About one of the key things I think that was noticed, especially when we were working with MDAs, was you need to have some kind of IT governance structure in place in order to be able to leverage ICT effectively within the institution. So the proportion of MDAs that do have this in place was rather low. I think that was about 30% of MDAs reported having any IT governance structure. And this could vary. It could be an ICT committee, it could be some board committee, it could be a whole range of staff teams that are just dedicated to that. So that kind of indicates that that's a gap that we probably need to figure out some way to be able to handle, because in order for them to be able to efficiently do that, we need to be able to address some of those gaps. The proportion of IT workforce. So we are looking at, okay, we are talking about going online and having, using technology to deliver services. But what proportion of our staff are actually IT staff? Because as we get more systems, as we get online, this become critical. So, the proportion, so like you could see at an agency level, at a total level, you could see about 2.6% of staff could be categorized as IT staff in ministries, and about 1.7% within agencies. So as a total, that's about 2.3% or so. You can look at trends in terms of they are still largely male, the staff, that is, about 2:1 when you look at a male-female ratio. There are slight improvements there, but those improvements are still low in terms of proportional gender balance. What types of IT equipment are used across MDAs? There are a whole range, as we show in that slide there. So we talk about, you have laptops, you have printers, you have fax machines, of course, are dying out and things like that. You have mobile phones, smart boards, fingerprint readers, and all sorts of different devices. So we kind of dig into that. Well, how is this useful? As government thinks about leveraging certain platforms or providing or adopting certain services, just getting a sense of where they stand or where government stands in terms of this is useful. Activities for which MDA staff use the internet at work. Well, communication is still the dominant activity. So sending and receiving email is right up there. Research and data collection is starting to come up. Providing services to the public is included in their social media and instant messaging and so on and so forth. At the lower end, things like purchasing goods and services are still rather low. When you try to dig in, ministries utilize the internet more for back-end operations. Compared to, for example, agencies and departments. On the other hand, the agencies utilize the internet more for things like staff training, moving documents around, streaming applications, and so on and so forth. But this kind of provides a sense in terms of what's happening in terms of how we use the internet within MDAs. One of those interesting things, so you normally receive an email from a government person, and maybe it's official, and the email address says so-and-so at yahoo.co.uk. This is the challenge that government has been fighting for a while in terms of being able to control communication and make this official. So about 94 or 95% of MDAs indicated that they provide an official email address to their employees. But out of that 95% or so, only about 70% required staff to use this MDA, the official email for official purposes. So yes, you might have the official email, but it may not necessarily be incumbent on you to be forced or required to do that. And out of those that require, again, a small proportion of those enforce that requirement. So, it has both security implications in terms of, if especially you're communicating official information or sharing official data and stuff like that. And it also has an image issue. In talking to some of the stakeholders within the sector, they talked about some public standing order in draft form that is directed towards this. And one of the recommendations that we make as a team is something about expediting this so that this becomes like a formal requirement. And there are also other aspects that relate to, NITA has a unified messaging and collaboration system, so they can actually be able to provide secure email services to government or give different government MDAs. And it's I think high time that we make it mandatory that all official communication that's government related uses only official email addresses. MDA users cited a range of problems or challenges with internet use. Of course, budget constraints are there. Limited bandwidth is a challenge. Computers or lack of computers is still a challenge. and so on and so forth. Some of the usual aspect. This is just a cloud taking into account the different aspects that relate to internet use. E-government services. So about half of all MDAs, maybe it's not actually, it's more than half, about 3 in 5 MDAs indicated that they offer some kind of digital or online service to the public. And they use a range of technologies, web apps, SMS apps, mobile apps. The proportion, of course, that provides assistive technologies is still very minor. And, given, the focus on this, I think when we were discussing with different stakeholders, I remember the stakeholders from Equal Opportunities Commission, engaging us and actually trying to push to make sure we capture, the proportion of, how different agencies serve people with disabilities and issues like that. So it's actually included within the survey. But I think one of the things that becomes important is if you look at whether you're looking at government entities, whether they are the MDAs, whether you're looking at local governments, and you look at the number of agencies or the number of local governments vis-a-vis the population they need to serve, the proportion just kind of, it's like we have no choice but to actually figure out how to leverage the digital solutions in order to be, because the population we need to serve is so much wider, it's so widely distributed that if we just think we'll rely on people walking into some office to get a service, we are still in big trouble. And of course, the issues around using assistive technologies, I think is something we need to start to pay attention to if we are to meet our targets in terms of inclusion. We asked government entities about the challenges they faced in terms of implementing or using digital services, digital options to provide public service delivery. The largest proportion of them talked about, lack of investments, or, budgetary constraints, money issues around high costs, higher than expected. Those were kind of like the biggest internal challenges that people talked about. Of course, there were others around internal resistance, lack of top management involvement, lack of trust, difficulty in integrating systems, lack of in-house expertise, the usual aspects. But the issue around investment and budget is kind of the biggest. So when we talk about internal, that's within the organization, and external, that's kind of, when they're thinking about interfacing with the outside or other MDAs. And in both of those, it's funding emerges, and then supporting infrastructure becomes also an issue. So including things like connectivity as well in there. And from experience, we point out, one of the things we make in the recommendation is to figure out how to actually get top management. Because if you don't have top management by, people that don't necessarily believe that using digital is going to help address certain issues, then a lot of the projects that we might implement may actually be futile. So figuring out how to actually get top management to understand and buy into this is going to be critical. And then, of course, there are issues around ensuring that we have the necessary capacities within each of these government MDAs. So this may require, identifying positions, making sure in terms of, public service, you have certain positions that are dedicated, and not just at the lower levels that we have an administrator, but all the way right up to the management level, that we have people with the right skills at the right levels to help guide these MDAs or institutions and to champion the use of IT within public service delivery. So very quickly, just give a few highlights that relate to internet access within local governments. So I talked about the fact that about 72% of them had internet access, but the caveat here is internet access irrespective of what channel. So whether it's a mobile phone, whether it's a modem that they throw in, whether they have fiber. So there was a wide range of those that happened. And then, of course, surprisingly, a large number of them report having a website. Whether that's updated or up to date might be another issue. Then when you do look at why does local government not have internet access, cost came up again as the biggest issue. So the reduction in terms of the cost of providing internet, whether it's to government MDAs or local government, is certainly a movement in the right direction. And then you talk about lack of expertise, internet is slow and so on and so forth. When it comes to leveraging digital options to provide public service, that's still rather low. The biggest aspect is the local government still expect people to come and walk in to receive a service. That's the predominant way. And by traditional media, they also talk about that's the newspapers, the TVs, and the radio stations. Those are still the public mass communication tools that they use to actually be able to do this. There are other channels that they do talk about, but as you get more digital, they use less and less of digital. But this presents the problem. When you start to look at the youth, so when you look at the population bulge of Uganda, it's predominantly bulging towards as you get younger. So these kids are predominantly younger, they're predominantly savvy, digitally aware, or they have the knowledge to be able to use some of these devices, irrespective of the challenges of accessing them. So here you have a government hierarchy or local government that's trying to serve this bulging population that's digitally savvy, but isn't itself digitally savvy enough to be able to leverage the technology to serve the population that's literate. So in that sense, we kind of have to figure out a way to scale or enable local governments to be able to provide, whether it's in terms of accessing the right skills, accessing the right equipment, and so that they can be able to leverage these digital technologies to be able to serve the growing young population that has the capacity to access services digitally. Wanted to dive into the households. So this is just a map. So as people were going around collecting data, you could actually get points where because they would pick up GPS points, so you can get an idea of how distributed of the different places where the data was collected. So just giving you a quick overview of the challenges in terms of the households and individuals. So about 22.7% of households had a computing device at home. So this could have been a desktop computer, a laptop, or a tablet. Okay. I imagine everybody in this room probably has a smartphone. So just think about that. You are part of 2.7% of the population or of the households that actually have a computing device at home. Okay. So in essence, that kind of just shows you the challenge we have in terms of being able to create or make access available, especially at the household level. Things like the challenges like the pandemic and the lockdowns have taught us that in terms of how we leverage technology and a whole lot of, and this was actually after the lockdown. So I think there's even a pandemic push in terms of being able to create connectivity. Okay, so there's of course an urban-rural divide with the urban areas or areas designated as urban, and this designation is developed by UBOS, having more access. Urban tends to refer to things like town councils, municipalities, like for example, capitals in a lot of the major urban centers or major cities and towns are categorized as urban. When you can then look into, was it a computer, was it a laptop, was it some kind of tablet? And you could see that the highest proportion of computing devices laptops. So increasing household access to these computing devices then becomes a challenge. And there's a direct correlation. So if wherever you increase access to these devices, then we are going to increase access to internet penetration at the national level. And studies have actually shown correlation between increasing access to penetration of internet penetration versus GDP. So that's why we pay attention to some of this, or why policymakers pay attention to this. So it's not just for the sake of itself. And then, of course, there are issues around digital inclusion. So when we talk about, we don't want anybody left behind, then we have to figure out ways to address these issues of urban versus rural. So can we explore more innovative schemes to reduce the cost of digital devices? Government is working or trying to, figure out ways of how to manufacture some of these devices locally as a way to actually improve access, so that people can affordability and so on and so forth. Internet, 5%, 5.7% or 6% of households had a working internet connection at home, irrespective of how that was. So I imagine everybody in here has some form of internet access at home. So again, think about it. Nationwide, that's 6% of all households had a working internet connection. Okay, the urban-rural bias exists again, and the majority of people talked about a smartphone. Using a smartphone as a modem was the most predominant way that households access the internet. Then you have USB dongles, you have routers, but ADSL, some kind of ADSL, fiber literally doesn't register when you're looking at the household level. So the number of households that have fiber to the home are still very limited, even in the urban areas. So we kind of need to set clear goals on how to make internet access more affordable and to increase adoption. So it's not just, it's not just enough that we have high-speed internet available, but how do we get people to use it and use it meaningfully? And the issues of being able to reduce the cost, whether it's of these devices, whether they're routers or modems and aspects. So we always see these wide, useful numbers in terms of the mobile network now is everywhere. Of course, you and me travel to some of these rural areas, and there are still places we go to and they do not have internet. But given where they have gotten and our adoption rate, I think there's a gap. How can we improve our adoption to at least match how far or where the mobile networks have been able to go? Okay. Looking a bit in terms at the individuals. So there were questions like, so how did this happen? So essentially, whenever we would sample, whenever we would go into a household, maybe a particular household was selected to respond to the survey. Within that household, you generate what they call a household roster. So you list everybody in there. The cutoff age was 15 years of age. And then the device would automatically pick somebody within the household to actually talk to. So that's how individuals were sampled in order to be able to generate the national picture. So whenever these individuals were asked a question, for example, how many have used the mobile phone in the past 3 months or in the previous 3 months to when prior to the survey, a high proportion of those, about 3/4 of the population, had used the mobile phone in the previous 3 months to the data collection. What proportion of those? So not everybody that had used the phone actually does own a phone. About 87%. So this 87 is of the 74%, indicating that the proportion of those that actually have or own mobile phones is still low. But it's the higher proportion. Again, if you quickly look at the numbers there, you can see there's a bias, rural-urban bias, and there's a male bias as well when it comes to actual usage. Although when you look at actual owning, the gaps might be smaller. So the survey explored reasons for not owning mobile phones, and of course, the number one challenge that people reported was, I cannot afford it. It's about 70% of the individuals indicated that they could not afford a phone. When you look at the age groups to get a sense, so we would ask people, to get an idea of their age, so we'd get an idea of their age range. You can see that predominantly, the young people, the high proportion of all age groups basically have access to a phone, at least as a basic start. Among those that owned phones, we would then delve into the issue of what type of phone is it, just to get a sense. Why? Of course, government has appreciated the fact that a smartphone is a gateway to, more complicated services or access to more complicated services. So the biggest proportion of people still have your basic phone. We nicknamed it the kabiriti. Yeah? That basic phone, that's really like the predominant phone. Feature phone, those tend to be slightly better than your kabiriti. They could also do internet access, but it's still not quite your smartphone. And the proportion of those that have smartphones is about 16%, which is still low. How many active SIM cards do you own among those that had mobile phones? So you could see that we're zeroing in on having a SIM card, but there's people still own 2, 3, and many more than 3, because when you look at a lot of you here, you would have a phone. The phone probably has 2 SIM cards. Normally you have your MTN, your Airtel, you have a modem with you, that's another SIM card, you have a router, that's another SIM card. So essentially, I think in terms of counting the numbers, that's actually the numbers of SIMs might actually as well have been undercounted. Have you used the internet from any location in the past 3 months at an individual level? So the proportion there is about, that's about 10%. So 1 in every 10 individuals in the country had used the internet in some form or in another. But there's still a high proportion. So if we are talking about using IT or the digital options to serve the general public, we still have some ways to go. When you look at age groups that have used the internet, you can see when the younger they are, the higher the likelihood. So as you get older, the proportion of internet users actually does reduce. So that is one of those challenges we highlighted when we talk about the fact that, by age group, individuals between 25 and 34 years had used the internet from any location compared to, to the other age groups. Overall, these people accounted for and this because of the bulge. So these people between 25 and 34 accounted for about 40% of all internet users. So essentially, if your target is to try and get to these kinds of people and you are not using digital technologies, then you might be doing yourself a disservice. Okay? We need to figure out how to leverage these technologies to be able to reach the younger population that is more digitally savvy. Reasons for not using the internet, do not know how to use it, is quite up there, highlighting the challenge we have in terms of digital skills development so that people can be able to acquire the skills to be able to use this. So do not know how to use it or lack the knowledge or skill was the major reason for not using the internet at about 36.7%. From a location perspective, the rural-urban gap was widest for do not know how to use it, indicating that skills is the biggest challenge. But there are also people who say, don't know what the internet is. So there, the problem is even bigger. So there's somebody who knows what it is and they just don't have the skills, but then there are those who don't even know what it is whatsoever. Okay. Financial access. So we talked a little bit about this. We dig into this to get a sense. So do you have access? So a high proportion of individuals had access to a personal bank account. This could be either through another individual or through owning their own, right? So when they said yes, you would then dig in to say, is it through another person? So another person, about 3% actually use an account, but it belongs to somebody else, but they can reroute or receive money through there. So when you look at those who own a bank account and whether they had a credit or a debit card, about 70% of those that have a bank account actually did have a debit card of sorts. Have you used mobile money? This is at the general population level. So about 65% of individuals have actually used mobile money in some form. But out of those, when you basically look at the general population, about 50% of the individuals that have that have used actually do have the mobile money account in their own names. So they have registered that account in their own names. One of the things that this is brings, of course, to the fore is that the future of finance is basically looking digital. So if we can figure out a way to make things easier in terms of finance in the digital realm, then we are moving in the right direction. Mobile money has basically managed to reach a far bigger proportion of the population compared to traditional banking. So that's something we kind of need to appreciate. Part of it is, of course, the nature of the fact that you have all of these agents that are plastered around all over the place. And I think those were some of the drivers that pushed the financial regulator to actually also allow agency banking. So some of those now double as bank agents as well, in order to be able to do this. Among individuals that used mobile money but lacked their own mobile money account, the biggest impediments was lack of a national ID. So, those are some of the tools that become important. So if the ability to access or have your own national ID, because now you need to register a SIM and the SIM has to be in your names. So there is a high proportion of people that don't have their own mobile money account because they don't have a national ID. So thinking about how to make that easier would be useful. There would be also other things like, how can we improve interoperability between the banks and mobile money? It still is pretty expensive to move money from my bank account to my mobile money wallet. It's much more expensive than withdrawing money from my mobile money wallet and turning it into cash. Why, given that that's a digital transaction, why is it that expensive? I don't know. I've had people complain about things like, okay, we have a mobile app, but I can't use it to check my balance. Why? Because when I check a balance, there's a transaction charge. How is checking my bank account balance a transaction that you want to charge? So there are issues around those that we can address. Of course, there are also other things that government is trying, but that we make recommendations around. For example, we have these social assistance grants that go for empowerment that keep going out on a regular basis. Some of the providers are exploring how to make this digital so that, the VSLAs or the SACCOs or a whole lot of those financial institutions or intermediaries that help people actually make it much more easier to, expand that financial capacity. So policies that expand financial inclusion in terms of, because there are areas where, so for example, if there are areas where mobile money agents tend to be concentrated in the urban towns, why? That's where the market is. But the problem where we have the biggest problem are rural areas, but those might have low population. So there's no incentive for me as a mobile money agent or anybody to set up as an agent there because the transactions will be low. But how can we incentivize that, to address in terms of policy so that, even those places where there's low population size or density, we could be able to extend some of these digital financial services because they are key to helping people address inclusion aspects. When it comes to e-government, 1 in 5 individuals were aware of any government service. So if you go 25 people and ask them if they were aware within this survey, and you ask them if they're aware of any government services provided online. So 5 out of these 25 would tell you, yes, I am aware of this service. I am aware URA does, I can file my taxes, or I can check examination results, or I can check my business something. So they were different, but so 1 in 5 were aware of any government services. But when these who were aware, so these 5 out of the 25, if I asked them if they had actually interacted with government in the last 12 months in some form digitally, only 1 out of those 5 had actually done so, interacted with government in terms using some kind of online platform, that is. So they could have interacted other ways, but when we're talking about online, so that's the proportion. What are the reasons why you did not contact or interact with government or MDA or public service over the internet in the previous 12 months? The highest reason is people still prefer personal contact. They want to go and speak to somebody because that's how we know things get solved. We don't yet believe that I can sit behind a computer and type things and things get resolved before somebody seeing me on the other end. So until you create that belief, and I am aware that I can sit behind my desk and I do stuff and something will happen that needs to happen, then I don't need to come and see you somewhere. Then we still have a small challenge. But then there's also about 17% of these people were like, I did not know that such services existed. So there is an awareness gap as well. So it looks, you may think in your circles, because we talk about filing taxes online or checking exams, it looks obvious. You assume everybody is aware of this. But then when you ask out there, the proportion of people that may know some of these are much lower. Issues around lack of knowledge and skills. I trust more submitting forms. I trust when I submit my paper. I don't want to submit these things. I want to complete my paper and I give it in, which is still a challenge we talked about. It's still like where I prefer to personal contact. So there are still some of those challenges in terms of being able to address that. Quickly zapping in as we come to the end, looking at the businesses. So on the business side, the proportion of these businesses, just a caveat, remember we talked about the kind of businesses these were. These are businesses that had 9 or more people. They had been around a little while, but even some of these, interestingly, so they gave us a sample of about 600, but we were able to talk to a small, I think we ended up talking to about half, about 200 and something of those. A lot of them had shut down because of COVID. Some had moved to other locations where you couldn't get to them. But even among those, so when you look at some of these figures, please keep that at the back of your mind. So internet access, about half of them had internet access, about a third of them had some business website, a third of them had about, business email, whether it's something at Gmail, but it was kind of dedicated towards business work. They had about a quarter had, some social media profile. A few had LANs and intranets and extranets and things like that. Why does the business not have internet access? Cost is the number one reason. Cost of internet access, cost of internet service is too high, is right up there. Cost of internet equipment is too high, is number 2. So essentially the issue of cost. So, when we talk about the declaration from the minister about lowering that cost, yes, it might be to the entities that NITA provides access to, which are MDAs, but believe me, as soon as that starts, you're going to see a trickle-down effect that comes into the general. So that's a certain welcome thing. The proportion that say they do not need the internet, which is true because some, they have some there, it's a small business, a business that's back there and deals in agriculture. They think they do not need that in terms of being able to expand their markets and things like that. But one of the things that becomes very clear from this is, the avenues. Can we explore avenues to lower the cost of computers, software, internet for businesses? There's also a need to create awareness among businesses about the benefits of this internet and other digital tools. So there are people that may not necessarily know. If somebody says, I do not need, if 1 in 5 businesses say they do not need the internet, but you are trying to find customers, I think there's a slight mismatch in there. How can we support businesses to create an online presence? So that it's not just about my physical location or my physical little shop or my office in a particular location, so that we can be able to expand their markets and so on and so forth, and leverage the e-commerce that we are talking about. I think those are some of the challenges that are going to disturb our policies and decision makers. So there's a proportion of there was a proportion of those that indicated using mobile money. If you look at this and you look at, okay, how did customers pay for their orders, goods, or services? So you look at cash. Here are the figures. I didn't actually record the actual figures. I can see I just copied the same figure across. Sorry about that. I will cross-check and update this. But one of the things that was in terms of usage, mobile money was like one of those that's highly used. I mean, largely relied on. While mobile money use was high, cash, whether it's for purchases or sales, was still predominant, and it dominates. So despite the potential risks that people know, well, I'm a business, I collect cash, I need to move it to the bank. If it's a lot, I need to pay the security team to move it. People still do that because, it's the predominant way that they're used to doing that. But as businesses, explore e-commerce, then the issues of, as we promote e-commerce, online sales, and so on and so forth, then the limitations we have in terms of payment platforms, in terms of logistics platforms become more eminent, okay? If I cannot accurately, if I go buy something and I want it delivered to me, but I can't pinpoint exactly where I may be located, and somebody has to come with a phone and they are calling and they're asking, and then I say, here we are, and then we link up. That's inefficient. Why? There might be 5 orders that are going in a particular direction, but because there isn't a good way to, process those and, identify or locate the places, then the border man or whoever is doing the delivery just has to do one delivery instead of doing the 5 that are going along a particular route, because there's nobody that's doing some form of consolidation or, identification of actual location. So figuring out ways to actually improve, the payment platform limitations and the poor delivery logistic platforms are things that we need to be able to explore to help businesses. But as well as the low level, many of them also complained about the low level of demand online. So yes, there are people who now do that, but the WhatsApps or the Facebooks or whatever that actually provide you that opportunity or channel are still rather limited to incentivize these businesses. And there are, I don't know if there are anybody, fintechs, these the financial technology companies that are building interesting platforms and things like that. I think that's one area that we can actually explore in terms of support. So as we come to the end, looking a little bit at, what were the recommended priority actions, just a quick summary in terms of the report. We highlight a number of priority action items in order to be able to address a whole range of problems that we find. So actually at the end of each section within the report, you'll find like a summary that kind of highlights the major challenges as well as the potential priority actions. But at a high level for the whole report, there's an issue around, ensuring that MDAs and local governments have the right guiding policies and structures in place that facilitate the use of IT at an institutional level. That's paramount, and that's something NITA and the ministry can do to actually help support MDAs because it's important. MDAs, the progress has started. The local governments still far behind, and there isn't really a good one coordinating entity that's helping them to actually figure out how to even leverage the technology to serve the masses that they need to do. We need to identify or figure out ways that help us increase the penetration of computers and computer usage, both at the MDA level and the local government level. So how can we actually increase the penetration within these institutions and then, provide people with the necessary skills and capacities to be able to use them for public service delivery. Action to reduce the costs of internet access. Yes, I know when you sometimes compare it to the past, we've come down, but the prices are still way high there. And if there are ways we can, and this isn't just a NITA or ministry thing. I think it's a collaborative thing. It can be ways, UCC, private operators, business, private sector, civil society. We all need to kind of figure out how to deal with this. We need to address the cultural and operational barriers that hinder sharing of data between MDAs. So we've done some interesting work around, trying to support government in terms of leveraging technologies to actually, address or improve service delivery. And you'd be amazed. So you're dealing with all of these entities, and then one entity sends you to another entity to get data, and you cannot get data. They are there. You can sign the NDA, then you go around in a loop, and you are like, but I'm doing work for NITAU, but this, and it sounds very easy, but it isn't as easy as it sounds. You can even sit in a room and have things agreed, and then you go and look for the data and you don't get it. And this gets even worse when you start to look at their other entities, external entities, like the operators, the mobile operators, they have very good data. The financial institutions, they have very good data. But as government, or even as these entities that do things, how can we tap into that data to help us make decisions? It's a big one. We need to figure out how to address, but it's one of those that we made recommendations around. Building online security awareness. So a lot of people indicate they don't feel at risk. But if you have data and a few entities here have had that experience of people hacking into your systems, but can you think about it this way, that it's not even just just even the local entities that are interested, at an institution, at a national level, even nation states do intelligence gathering. And as you go online, it no longer has to be about people. I just have to get into your system and I pick the data. I don't even have to send operatives anymore. As long as you're online and you have the data I need, I get into the data, I pick up your database, then I know what's happening if I'm interested in particular things. So increasing online security awareness among MDAs, local governments is going to be paramount, but as well as among individuals. So you go online, somebody has the profile, you have your date of birth, you have where you stay, so if I need to find out information about you, I don't need to do very many things. I just go to your Facebook profile and I pick up everything I need, if I need any kind of information. So creating that level of awareness. I'm not saying sharing information is bad, but at least we should be aware of what is going on so that we know exactly, or if we are thinking about protecting our own privacy, we know how we can be able to deal with it. Extending fiber across the country, starting with all district headquarters as a priority. Government has always indicated this as a priority to connect all district headquarters, but we haven't even managed to connect all district headquarters, but we are talking about the parish development model. So we haven't covered all the districts. If we get all the districts, then we will go down to the sub-counties. Then from the sub-counties, we will go down to the parishes. So if we are talking about the parish development model and we want to know whether we are making progress or not, then our ability to be able to collect data at that level is very, very important. But if we don't have the connectivity to be able to do that, then we might have some challenges, especially when it comes to, monitoring, evaluation, reporting progress, or even actual service delivery itself. Okay. Awareness and user IT skills in general, in the general population, are still very limited. So people that have skills. So you had a range of, there are some global tests that, you ask a range of questions about the levels of things people can do. Can you move a file? Can you do that? Can you do that? We included in the report, but from those you can gauge that the level of IT skills among the general population is still low, and we need to figure out ways to improve these. Businesses need specific targeting and training so that they can be able to exploit e-commerce. So a whole lot of these, when you go to businesses that tell you they don't need that, I don't believe that it would be useless if they could actually know how to use it. I think the challenge is, creating the necessary awareness and simple enough basic tools. Not many people come to you and they say, I need an email. A lot of people now have Yahoo and Gmail and things like that. The reason they do that, because it's very easy to create an email. I go online and I create an email myself. Just imagine it was just as easy to create my own website and my own, little e-commerce shop that sells things. I would do it because I do. So it's about how easy you make it and creating the awareness so that I learn that's useful, because everybody now understands the use of an email address. Thank you very much.
Let's give Ali a round of applause again. Thank you, Ali, for and that is just the highlights of the report. And the report is online and you can access it. It is very comprehensive with all the information that he has presented. in much more detail. And of course, it has given us the highlights of where we stand as a country in terms of ICT penetration at the different levels, that is MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies, the district local governments, the household, yes, so, and the businesses, and of course, BPO. And I hope that while he was presenting, you were also looking out for opportunities on where you can also come in and make your contribution. I once again want to thank all our online audience, and of course those of us who are here at on premise, but also the press for coming, of course, to grace this occasion. All media houses, we really thank you. Before maybe I invite the representative from the Ministry of ICT, I just picked a few areas. Of course, we are also happy to note that since the last survey, we've seen improvement in terms of digitization all across the government entities. And as you can see, we coming from the previous survey in 2018 to date, I think COVID in a way was also a blessing. Most of these services actually, we woke up and started taking services online because we needed to get in. I mean, the entities still needed to continue with their operations. So you can see that there is a significant growth. We stand at about 59% of the MDAs offering, of course, services online compared to 2018. Of course, there are still some other areas, of course, areas around assistive technologies, and of course for the disabled. And this is something that we will focus on. The other areas, of course, is awareness, which we've seen. There's a lot that we need to do around awareness, but also mindset change of our people. Of course, to utilize these platforms wherever they are to get all this government or to receive all these government the government services. The other area, of course, which we do note is that the increase or the improvement in terms of access and usage of internet across government. Now, as NITA, of course, with the support of the ministry, we are committed to, of course, extending the infrastructure so that all government entities can be, including local governments, can be covered. So that is of course, we are on course with it. And also, these are highlighted in the NDP3 increase of national ICT infrastructure, but also the usage of e-government services to improve efficiency in the delivery of e-government services. Yeah, so these are just highlights. And of course, as we saw, there's a disparity between the urban and of course the urban and of course the rural. There's still some bit of a digital divide there, and as government, this is what actually we look out for, that we, given this opportunity, we will continue rolling some of these services, deepening the services at the local government levels, and of course in all our operational environments. The other area also was around, of course, capacity. I must say, together with the Ministry of ICT and the national guidance, we did develop what strategy to enhance and sustain the ICT function across government, that is in MDAs, but also in the district local governments. And this will enable the ministry being the parent, it will be easy. The issues of deployment, the issues of capacity building, the issues of ensuring that there is an ICT cadre at all levels. And of course, Ali did highlight the need to have ICT being represented in the governance structures of our respective entities. This is critical so that while we want to do as a department, you might be in a department and possibly your voice is not heard, say at board level or at top management level. The ministry is working on, we've already done the strategy on how this can be implemented. We did talk also about of course, the cost of internet as one of the barriers for access. The minister of ICT recently, of course, highlighted that now that we've concluded the last mile project, of course, we're working together with the ministry to reduce this cost to about $35 from the 70, and we've come a long way. And the MDAs represented here can attest that when we started providing this internet in 2013-14, we were at $300. We came down to $190, then eventually to the $70, and it has really been progressive. And of course, with the continuous support of government, and of course also the private sector, to ensure that these services are reduced for us to access. So it is work in progress, and we will continue working together in this regard. The other issue, which of course, together with the Minister of ICT and of course the ICT sector, and I think this cuts also across the entire programming of the NDP3. Mindset change is critical for us and for as government, but as MDAs, local government, but also to enable our the public, to enable the citizens, you know, utilize these services. Of course, government is trying to digitize these services. And whom are we digitizing services for? You know, to serve our citizens better, so that they can easily access some of these services. So mindset change is something that as the Ministry of ICT and together with the agencies, we are taking note of it. And we will, in our planning, focus on some of those issues. Allow me at this time, welcome with those few highlights. Welcome Michael, our Commissioner. Michael is the acting Commissioner, e-Services at the Ministry of ICT, representing the PS. Let's give him a round of applause as he comes.
Thank you, Richard. Good morning, all. Richard has already given a few comments. Before I can read the PS's speech and actually launch the survey, I just had a few comments to make. One, on the issue of guidance to the sector. The ministry is engaged, as Richard stated, in what we call institutionalizing the ICT function by setting up those departments in the MDAs to roll out e-government. In regard to cost of internet, the ministry has been engaged in identification and development of alternate routes to the sea cables, and that process is ongoing. We expect once those routes are in place, the costs will further go down. In regard to integration of systems, the ministry, along with NITAU, of course, developed what we call the e-government interoperability framework, from which the UG bus, the hardware was developed to interlink the different systems among the agencies. So those are just a few comments. I would like to note recently I engaged the South Koreans and the Estonians, and I was delighted to note that they stated among the priority countries to engage with across Asia, across Europe, across Africa, Uganda is one of the few. And it's because of some of these interventions we're doing, the policies, the infrastructure. So I think we are moving somewhere as benchmarked by the Koreans and Estonians. I will go to the speech by the PS, and it reads as follows. The board members of NITAU, the executive director, members of the digital transformation program, the press, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. It gives me great pleasure to officiate this dissemination workshop on the findings of the National Information Technology Survey 2022. The main objective of the study was to ascertain the status of information technology in terms of availability, access, usage, affordability, and satisfaction with digital services among MDAs, businesses, households, and individuals. The findings will provide government and stakeholders with accurate data and information to guide the development and review of policies, enable informed decision-making, and facilitate planning and research for sustainable development. The government of Uganda is committed to building a strong foundation for the ICT landscape in the country. Among these efforts include putting in place a conducive enabling environment by developing and implementing laws, regulations, policies, standards, and strategies that spur the development and adoption of ICTs in the country. In light of these efforts, we developed the National Backbone Infrastructure, NBI, which provides connectivity to several government administrative units and service centers. In addition to that, the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, together with its agencies, including NITAU, is championing the development of e-government services that are intended to enhance efficiency in the delivery of public services to citizens. The findings of the IT survey will provide guidance on areas to focus to improve access and usage of ICTs, e-government services, as well as innovation, among others. As evidenced by the survey data, the growing demand for online services within the public domain, coupled with the increase in mobile phone and internet access across the country, shows great potential for increased digitization of service provision to the Ugandan public. Much as this survey showed the significant progress that has been achieved in terms of the overall penetration and utilization of ICT services, the reality is there's unequal access to ICT use across the country in terms of rural, urban, gender, and income-based divides. With this in mind, the ICT sector will deliberately plan and implement interventions as highlighted in the NDP3 under the Digital Transformation Program to narrow this digital divide. As I conclude, I take this opportunity to thank you all for participating in this dissemination workshop, but most importantly, for taking part in the survey. I also thank NITAU for undertaking the study, whose findings will go a long way in guiding the sector in planning, focusing priorities, closing development gaps, and ensuring that the use of ICTs is adopted to improve delivery of services at all levels across the country. Indeed, our goal is to build a digitally driven and knowledge-based economy for the social economic transformation of our country. I encourage us to study these findings and use them objectively so that we can shape and guide the holistic development of the ICT sector. With these few remarks, I therefore launch the National IT Survey Report 2022 for God and my country, signed Dr. Amina Zawede, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of ICT and National Guidance. Thank you.
We request Ali and Dr. Abraham to come.
Allow me, let's give a round of applause to our PS. Yes, this report has finally been launched. And like I said earlier, you can get the full details of the report, very comprehensive, on our website. And if you've given us your email address, we'll simply send you the link. For those online, I request that you also give us your email contact so that we can send you the link to the full report. At this time, may I request also the board members.
And Dr. Abraham.
Yes, Dr. Abraham. Let's, yes, part of the team, please come up here for this ceremonial launch of the report.
Sorry, could we also have Gloria come up, because you and the supporters wanted the team up. Dr. Abraham Yeyo, Dr. Rosie Ngabirano is online, so that we can formally hand over the report to NITAU, who will then hand it over to the minister, because worked through NITAU. And then the representative of PS will formally sign on that, and we shall give him a copy of the report. Dr. Rosie Ngabirano is online. She cannot join us. I should mention, colleagues, that figure 152, we have seen page what? I'll cross-check. There's a figure which has got an error. I think you saw a chart in which all the percentages were 3.4. That is an error. We just noted it, and it will be corrected in the report online. So if you have been downloading, please give us today so that you download the correct report. Apologies for that error. So through you, Richard, please receive this and then handle the rest of the honors. Thank you very much on behalf of the consulting team. Board members, please. And then the consultants will sign in their corner. Richard and Gloria. You take responsibility to save us. If anything is wrong in the report, whereby signing takes partial responsibility. Yes, sir. Abraham and Ali.
Thank you.
Chairman, send you one.
Yes. Oh, want to take a picture? Okay. At this point, allow me welcome the board chair, Honorable Kavajo, to come and give us a few remarks, and then we will go into Q&A as we close. Our time is really, we've used our time very well. Honorable, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Richard. I want to thank the consultants who have prepared that report. I want to thank the board of NITA, the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance led by the Honorable Minister, Chris Bariomusi, and the PS, Dr. Amina Zawede, for all the support. I want to thank all those who contributed, who made contributions in terms of feedback in order to get this information. And in advance, I want to thank all of you for making use of the results of this survey. This survey will be very important in our own work, in the ministries, in the agencies, and so on. Also for government in terms of, sometimes in terms of policies, for example, tax policies. If the report says that we don't have enough people with smartphones, as government, you could make a decision and say, okay, let's reduce the tax on smartphones so that we have more people having access. So I want to thank all of you. And of course, there is Q&A, but after we have finished, I wish all of you a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable. Let's give a round of applause for our board chair. Indeed, thank you, board, for coming. These are the things that, of course, with your guidance, we've been able to come this far. And of course, when you ask us in the boardrooms that what is the current state of ICT in the country? Indeed, this has been through your guidance. So thank you very much for honoring the invitation and coming to be a part of us this morning. At this time, we want to take on possibly a few questions and answer session. This is a question and answer session, just a few, so that we can then close our engagement this morning. But I want to thank, once again, I want to thank you. If you have any question, for those who are on online, please just let us know, and you can type your questions there. We will get it from the chat section, and of course, try to give feedback. And then, of course, for us who are here, you can just, by show of hand, if you have something to be clarified, or you want to know where many of the things that we're doing as a sector, please, this is the time. We will take on a few, and then we close. We are actually working well with time, because we were supposed to close this session, this event by 11:45. So we have about 15 minutes. So please, if there's any, yes, I see a mic. I see a hand up there. Can someone move the mic?
My name is Robert Luasa.
Yes.
I work with the Office of the Prime Minister as Principal Systems Administrator. I want to thank the consultants for the report. And I rise on the issue of last mile vis-a-vis extension of the NBI. We know that RCIP, that the project that has been responsible for doing the last mile, is closing. And we already have a fear that there are some district headquarters that do not have connectivity already. And you alluded to the issue of the parish development model. And we need to collect data from as deep as the parish. So what strategy do we have to ensure that we extend this connectivity further to the local government headquarters where connectivity is still wanting, and also drill down to the sub-counties up to the parish level? I thank you.
Okay, can someone, we have two mics down here. Can I request someone to move this mic? We have hands. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. While the mic moves around, Anthea Pilo, FSD Uganda. A couple of questions. There was a slide where we talked about financial access. And it looks like credit cards, people with access to credit or debit cards are about 68.5%, something like that, which is a little higher than mobile money, which is 64.5%. I just wanted to understand why it seemed so high, especially because we don't have a very high number of people with bank accounts. The other question was with regards to multi-SIMing. Do you have data on the actual unique number of subscribers or the number of multi-SIMing? I know we talked about having people with a number of SIM cards, but we have actual data that speaks to that approximates the number. The third is just a request. Do you think we could have access to the data ourselves, the raw data? It would be nice to do some experimenting and investigate with other sources of data to see what kind of new information we could be able to access.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you,
Yes.
Moderator. My name is I'm Senior Commissioner of Police, Soanyana Yusuf. I'm the Acting Director, ICT Uganda Police. I would like to thank the survey team for the good work, but I just have one comment. What didn't come out very well in the presentation was about the crime, the crime survey on crime. In the recent past, we are receiving so many crimes related to online transaction. So we do have expected maybe the survey to bring out the leadiness of police in handling these crimes and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Uganda Police.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And presenters, thanks very much. Balisgara John from Ministry of Local Government. I have just 2 questions. One is concerning the website, which was raised, and actually it was noted that almost these local governments constitute about 70%, they own websites. But in terms of usage and updates, it was raised that it constitutes about 28%. This is an issue which I had raised a long time ago, together with the NITA-U officials, specifically BOSA, whom you very well know. What happened, NITA-U had a project which developed websites for all the district local governments in the whole country. Actually, even 70% is at a low figure, because I tried to cross-check with all district local governments, and I found that the districts which don't own websites are then just recently newly created districts. However, they lack capacity. What happened after developing the websites? They just, I think, pushed the website and moved away. This is an issue I have raised with NITA-U already. I think it is high time we get a solution to this. Secondly, we held a meeting with the ICT officers together with communication officers. They seem to have a gap. They don't know that they are supposed to support each other. So you find that the ICT officer has got most of the credentials concerning the website, and the other one is just collecting information, but they don't know how to support each other. I think it is a gap that we need to have a solution to. Finally, I think most of my colleagues received zero budget on ICT. I think I don't know how we can start and how we can end with the zero budget on ICT. And I think these issues concern us as ICT officers together with the NITA to see how we can really have an improvement. With the zero budget, you can do nothing, I can assure you. I thank you.
We'll have him, we take on Rogers here, and then the next set. So let me give an opportunity. Yes, sir. Introduce yourself and then you'll, yes.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Jeho Joseph. I am the founder of a startup called GoPay. Just to raise this, from the report, we've seen that the payment systems, when it comes to digitalization, is still low, about 3.4%, something like that. But as startups, you're always finding these challenges. I mean, working with the government institutions to make sure that we can raise these numbers, because at least a good number of people is being responsive, but then accessing the data or accessing the services within different government institutions when it comes to maybe licensing and stuff like that, is still an issue. So mine is to raise a concern on NITA. How are you ensuring that these policies are actually put at work? Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Rogers Karebi is my name. I am the chairman of the BPO Association of Uganda, and I'm extremely excited to be here. But I want to start by thanking NITA, who have done a very good job at reducing the cost of internet. And I've got two concerns, mainly to the ministry. I recall towards end of 2021, there was a BPO council that was set up. And in our interaction in April this year, we're told that they're coming up with a BPO policy. My question is, are there timelines when we can see this? Because we're waiting for that policy that is going to encourage, especially government entities, to start outsourcing some of these services, which would answer part of what he talked about in his presentation. Yeah. And when some of these agencies start they move from zero budget to some budget, then our members can start supporting so that we keep updating even things like social media. My last question, a bit on what I was talking about. I remember in part of our discussions in about 2012, 2013, some of the interventions to reduce the cost of internet were things like a dig once policy, whereby all telcos use the same infrastructure to minimize cost of delivery. I probably beg to be advised if that has helped in reducing the current cost, but also the aspect of reducing cost of reducing taxes or removal of taxes on smartphones so that more people have access to smartphone or gadgets. Thank you very much.
Okay, we can let's take on this first, and then we will of course move to the next lot of sets of questions so that we don't lose them all. I'll answer a few. Then of course the consultant is also here to take on some, and then of course the Ministry of ICT representatives are here also to provide some feedback, of course, from the sector with regards to some of these. I'll go straight to OPM. You raised an issue of what is our plans, of course, to continue rolling out connectivity across the country. I must say that one of the projects I think that we are currently developing is, I think, the Uganda Digital Acceleration Project. And I think, of course, we have a government commitment on it. It's just a few things to be done, then we'll begin rolling out as a continuing project from RCIP. But I must say that we have, of course, plans. We have plans of implementing and continuing rolling out these services or connectivity across the country. Now, the government through Minister of Finance, of course, has been our big support on this. And every year, of course, we plan to connect a certain number depending on the amount of funding that we've received. But on the side, we are working on a project currently, and I think OPM is a big stakeholder on this because it will also take care of some of the refugee host communities, and that project is in focus. And we will, of course, as we begin the process of moving towards the effectiveness, we'll definitely engage you to see how best we can work together on this. So we have a project, a follow-up project after the regional communications infrastructure program that ended actually last month. So really, we have a follow-up project that we are preparing, and we hope that it can answer some of these connectivity challenges. There was a question around financial access, the credit cards versus the accounts. Maybe I leave that for the consultant to answer that. And then the issues on raw data, Gloria, we will, of course, talk to the participant who has raised this issue, and we sort it out. The issues of website is very critical. Of course, together with the Minister of ICT, we did develop the guidelines for developing websites across government, but also for the local governments. And as NITA, we offer full support free of charge. We have developers on ground. Whenever a need comes, we simply assign our staff to go sit with them, develop the website, and of course, also take some sort of training or to update. And we've done these trainings continuously to support these local governments to ensure that their websites are updated with critical information. However, we also do note that there's a challenge around capacity building. And that's, in my earlier comments, I'd said the ministry has come up with a strategy to enhance and sustain the ICT function. In most of the district local governments where we go and develop these websites, the people sometimes who are assigned to work with us are not necessarily IT, maybe professional, or they even lack the capacity. So we've taken the development. We've taken on right now the development, the registration, the domain registration upon ourselves as NITA. We plan for it for all the government, for all district local governments. We've taken on that role so that we want these websites to be up and running. We are also providing hosting environment for these websites for free. So we develop for free, we host them for free, and we are now, in our budgets, we actually include an element of ensuring that the websites are registered, the domain registration, so that they're up and running. However, the issues of update is something that, updating these websites, it is something that, of course, we still need continuous engagement, because the information comes from the district local governments or the entities that we've supported. But I think it is something that we can work with our comms team again and see how best we can support those websites across the district. ICT officers, of course, the training is required. We will continue. We've done several of these trainings, and IT people are nomads. We keep moving. You train today, the next 6 months later, that person is not there. So really, mindset, and then of course, continuous capacity building is critical for us. The issues of zero budget. This one, of course, I think we'll leave it for the Minister of ICT to reign at that level and to support us at that level. All of us, including NITA, we are also a government entity supported through that government resource. And sometimes you want connectivity and possibly we don't even have that enough budget. So it is indeed because of the priorities of government, which are enormous. But again, I think government is committed to this and we will continue pursuing. And also maybe for the ministry, I'll also leave the BPO policy. The council, of course, is developing the policy. What is the timeline? The dig once policy, of course, the Ministry of ICT in 2018 developed the national broadband policy, of course, which one of the aspiration is that we should share infrastructure in some places so that the issues of digging everywhere is avoided. So we are working with the Ministry of ICT as a sector to now, from the policy, to now develop what we are calling the implementation strategy. And of course, then how do we start now using, together with the private sector, how can we leverage on the private sector infrastructure where, for example, government has not laid and there is already an existing, can we leverage on that? So that is something that the ministry is putting focus on, and we will, of course, we'll pursue it in that regard. The removal of taxes, I think the ministry, let me leave this one for the ministry, but again, also I must say that the ministry, we've already started engagement, I think with Minister of Finance to see how how government can reduce taxes on these ICTs to ensure access to some of these services. So allow me at this point, pass on the financial access issue to our consultant. And then, of course, the SIM card, there was also a comment around the SIM card, unique numbers of subscribers. And then, of course, issues around cybercrime. Why didn't we, the information did not come out well, but you can highlight on that, Doctor. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. I'll answer both as a consultant, as a citizen of Uganda, because I've also got an interest in this. First of all, as here, thanks a lot. For clarity, that was 68.4% of the 10.4% who have got bank accounts. In other words, 10.4% have got bank accounts, but among those 10%, 68.4% have either got credit or debit cards. The others don't utilize them. I hope that clarifies it. You have got the answer, I believe, on data. I believe this is important because it is a lot of data. The analysis we did cannot cover all the possible findings you can get from that data. So the academics and the researchers should really interrogate this data a lot more. Even the report has got a lot more information than what was presented here. So please do look at it. The multi-SIMs, this is partly a political question all over the world. It looks good said that we have got so many SIMs because currently the practice under ITU is to count SIM cards. We have been pointing out for the last 15 years that that gives a fallacious feel for the number of subscribers. And therefore, based on the percentages here, the statisticians can go and read translation of the real number of SIM cards. So that a statement is made, but yes, it is very true that the number of SIM cards does not represent the number of unique users. So let's get that very clear. I know Uganda Communications Commission is talking about that. Christine was here. She's in charge of research at UCC. She might want to say something about that. Have we shifted to actually counting unique users? Now that we associate SIM cards with the national identification card, it should be possible to say that we have got exactly this number of consumers, users, rather owners, based on the unique needs that have been registered. Access to data I've talked about. survey of crime. Now, I don't know whether I could have handled this, Richard. It was beyond our terms of reference, but we cover it by implication, not at the same level. We apologize. When you talk about cyber incidents. So where cyber incidents are reported, then this comes up. But of course, this is not going to address those who are being scammed utilizing mobile money. And therefore, we don't have an answer for that. This is an area that needs to be looked at, but more from, I think, the policing and security point of view. It was not part of the terms of reference. Local government websites, I'll just make a comment. This was not ours, but we've got a challenge in Uganda, colleagues, that we like focusing delivery on countable things. So it is easy to say that we have set up websites for 70% of the local government agencies, then say that we have built capacity to sustain those websites among those ministries. And this is a trap all agencies tend to fall in. And therefore, we tend to put in place things before we talk about the human resource that is going to sustain them. And therefore, I would have said that the development of the website should have been maybe a step behind development of human resource. And these are the communications people who are going to maintain these websites, because the website is a communications tool and they've got to be viewed as such. Talking about online presence for little businesses, again, this is same political, but I must point it out as a researcher. We do know that Facebook, for example, has got applications through which many small enterprises were setting up their online presence. But currently, we cannot access that officially. And therefore, this is a bit of the challenge, that setting up these online presences should be made easy. Just like my colleague mentioned, if I want to set up an email address, I just get online and I do it. I don't need an education to do that. Why can't we find simple ways of doing the same thing for online presence? And therefore, those startups which are talking about developing applications, please think about that, because I believe it is possible. I think I might have addressed everything. Interventions reduce cost of internet. Yes, we talked about collaborative approaches. I believe the only reason internet is still expensive in Uganda is that we don't want to collaborate. Government, private sector, everybody is working alone. Because if Uganda was to procure all the incoming broadband collectively, it would be a lot cheaper. The real cost of internet in Uganda is within Uganda, it's not outside. So let's face it, until we can address the costs in Uganda, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that less than 5% of the cost is external. The rest of the cost is internal, about our inefficiencies, lack of collaboration and everything, and taxation that goes along with it. So the real challenge is here in country. I believe that addresses the questions we had. Thank you.
Maybe may I invite the representative from the ministry to just also highlight the issues on the policy for the BPO, and of course I think that's only that one.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I know there's the issue of the BPO policy. Also, there's the issue of budgetary support,
Yes.
which you mentioned. Now, in regards to BPO, of course, they are supportive policies that have been developed. One of them, of course, is the personal data protection policy, which was actually developed such that the market can open up here. It was one of the requirements by Europe, by the US, that we have a personal data protection policy. So in terms of policy development, we are ready. In terms of this particular BPO policy, I know it has been drafted. It's to be presented to cabinet. So that is being fast tracked. So we hope this will be finalized quite soon. On the issues of support, budgetary support, I think it's a problem that goes across board, as has been mentioned. At the ministry, we are taking on the role of managing the cadres, providing for capacity building. However, the equipment and services at the entities belong to those entities. They should therefore budget for those items, and they should therefore plan for those items in the annual and quarterly budgets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's take, we have hit, okay, let's take a few. Let's take a few. I think starts from where you are right there. Then, of course, as we move, we will, because of time, we can take these hands that are up. Then, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, the presenters. I'm Angela Navisere. I work with MOVPED. And my question is, Pillar 6 of the parish development model is developing a system, the PDMIS. And in the system, we want to integrate banks with other systems together with the PDMIS. So how ready is the Uganda hub ready to facilitate this? Thank you.
Let's move in that. Okay, we will take, let me see those whose hands are up. Okay, 1, 2. We'll only take those ones because actually our time, and yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Richard and team. Just to the consultants, there was one statistic that you talked about, 2.7. My name is Patrick Kagenda from Data Care. There was a percentage of 2.7% of the households having a computing device. And then 5.7% have access to internet. Are those related, or these are borrowed devices in homes? I need to understand the growth. Then the other part is really, I don't know, at what point shall we stop receiving the Gmails from government? The Gmails from government institutions. How I wish my Independence Day would say that no more such a communication, because at times we share important information, but you're like, okay, this is Gmail and to government, and before that, the staff has moved to another ministry and you're still thinking they are in the other one because the contact is the same. My other, the last part is on the e-governance services. You talked about 59% of the MDAs have e-services, and it's we can quickly say that 41 don't have. But what I would want to know, how many services are still manual? Such that we say in Uganda we have 400 manual services, and out of these only 10 have been automated. Last week I went to renew my driving permit, which expired, and the agency didn't alert me that it has expired. It is my officers who alerted me. And if this is a business that I'm going to pay, how nice I would have loved to get an alert, Mister. Within 6 months, your driving permit will have expired, because this is revenue to government anyway. So other than a penalty, let it be a service. So I got it at a record time. Within 1.5 hours, I was able to renew my permit. So thank you, government. Unfortunately, at the same time, I moved to pick my national ID of my son in Kira. I reached there and the guy looked at the pile of IDs to identify my son's ID. Took us about 3 hours. The guy is sorting, and we are not alerted that it is ready. So let's talk about the whole story, and maybe this can come in to my professor I'm seeing my friends here mixing up the word digitalizing and digital and digitize. Are we really interested in digitizing, or we are digitalizing the country? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kagenda. Okay, we have, yes.
Thank you, Patrick. Fred Kakoza, Uganda Investment Authority. Mine is looking at the MDAs, and to the consultant, I would want to know, I've not had chance to look at the detailed report, but I don't know if it has had a look at the maturity levels in terms of ICT of the various MDAs. Why I'm pointing to this is it does affect the whole service delivery. It does affect the planning. We've talked about gaps in structure, governance especially, no voice at the top levels. We've talked about gaps in skills. So moving from the consultant part on looking at maturity levels, then to NITA, is it possible then, if that list is at least for those that are low maturity level, to get that help, similar to what you did with the websites? If the cause is probably lack of strategic planning, I'm assuming the strategic plan would handle issues to do with staffing, decisions, identification, needs assessments, and things of the nature, building the ICT capacity so that the organization is better. ICT is enabling our processes. ICT is opening business for our BPOs in our organizations. Organizations are still failing to do that because even our internal processes are not, ready. So just like you had your website standard, can we have a standard for ICT structure or something for these organizations? So from that, we have probably even a template of a strategic plan that you can sit with at least these MDAs at a low maturity level that can then help them be ready to actually, as it digitalize or digitize?
Okay, let's move to the other side. Thank you. Thank you for, yes.
Thank you. I'm Faith Dorothea. We're from PITSPA, that's Financial Technology Service Providers Association of Uganda. I have two questions. One is towards the digital skills gap. It is very clear that digital literacy or illiteracy is a key factor of inclusion and the adoption of ICTs. My question is, what is NITA doing and academia doing to increase the percentage of those that are digitally literate? And this is coming from the grassroots, so that is including ICT in the curriculum. Two, as a representative of fintechs, we appreciate what the steps that NITA is taking to increase the penetration of ICTs across the country. However, I hope I'm not preempting the next phase of this project. I would want to ask if there is a sketch or if there is a timeline to the implementation of the last mile connectivity project. Thank you.
Hello.
Okay.
Thank you so much, presenter, and the researchers for the wonderful report presented. My name is Joseph Siemenya. I'm from Minister of Public Service, Principal ICT Officer. According to the research, it is indicated that 9% of the MDAs still prefer other ISPs other than NITA. My question is, what are the reasons why they don't want to be onboarded on NITA-U as an ISP? And what is the way forward to bring them on board? The second one is we're having a bigger challenge. I think everyone can see it. According to the presentations, we are seeing that we have limited awareness. We have internet is very expensive. It is slow. Their governance, ICT governance is still low. The mindset is still low, low skills. So these are big challenges. And I think as government, we should look at methods of how to tackle them. Are we going to tackle them at a go, or are we going to look at them as priorities and we see how we can address them better? Thank you.
Thank you. How many people? I thought we had the last days, but there is.
Okay, thank you.
At least the hands that I saw, him, and then
thank you so much, Chair. Yes. Good afternoon to you. My name is Matthew Ruvurwa. I'm from the Ministry of Finance. I have 2-3 issues, not necessarily questions, but for Professor Tusubira, I wanted to know, since we are using the baseline of 2018, in general terms, are we progressing, static, or regressing in terms of what you saw? There was something on the BPO, and I've been following BPOs for some good time. I note that one of the reasons why actually locally we are not using those services is because they are not marketed. And when you look at policy level, right from HE, when they are speaking about BPO, they are talking about other countries, not domestically. Maybe we need to package that information and make sure that the local people can also see where to benefit from that area. Again, for Ali and Professor, I saw your presentation, and I think it has some good information on gender, but very less on equity other than regional distribution. I'm bringing the issue of people with disabilities. We are developing lots of ICT systems and services, but how are we preparing access for the people with disabilities so that they can also benefit from this environment? The statistics we have show that we have over 3 million people in this country with disabilities. Are we going to leave them behind? My second last is the status of the IT enabling environment. Again, Professor, what is there when you look at the port in terms of policies, strategies, frameworks, and regulations? What is missing? What is the gap in those particular areas? I think finally, I see again when you did the invitation, we've been participating in this survey up to date. But I think you need to take this further after this meeting, because you are speaking to us. We are in this ICT spectrum in the area, but now you need to communicate to those who are making more critical decisions for this country. So either you repackage this information in a particular format, and it goes up to cabinet level so that these critical decisions can be made. Else, generally, I find this report very useful. We want to thank you so much for coming up with this.
Thank you. I will have, okay, I see. I'm now lost for decision. I see the hands are becoming many, but I hope we are not repeating the questions.
No.
Yes.
My name is Joseph Okello, and I'm from Uganda Revenue Authority, from the research department. Internet is growing, and that is good news, I mean, for everyone. The output for internet is data. Data is being created day in, day out from institutions, from individuals, and so on. But access to this data, and I'm not talking of this data that you people used for preparing this report. I'm talking of data being generated from the different institutions and individuals. We are now in an era of research-based policy decisions and so on. And for us to make such informed policies, we basically need this kind of data. NITAU, we expect you to be taking a lead in providing this kind of data. Because right now, if I wanted data, let me say from different institutions, it would be very hard. There is no central place to get this data. So what is NITAU doing to produce this? I know there are so many issues that people say, they say security and etc., but there are always solutions for this. I mean, blockchain technology is a solution to such big data usage and security across. So I think NITAU should probably take on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me allow two people. We have one from the Ministry of ICT and then from OPM again. So those should be the final. Our time is really fast spent, and the venue in which we are in, they're only giving us up to 11:45, but let's give, and then of course, Mr. Olanya, and I think those should conclude.
Thank you, Richard and the presenter. Very quickly, first is for us to get these results into some sort of rating scorecard, since you've covered all the MDAs and all the local governments, and perhaps carry that on into an annual rating index. I know that showing, for example, Mr. Kakoza mentioned the maturity capacities of institutions on an annual level can help trigger internal efforts towards building capacity. The second is on a section I was hoping to see in the study report, but perhaps it was not part of the terms of reference. And that's a review of the policy and regulatory framework within the country, because we can look at the ICT capacities and IT capacities at different levels. But if we don't review our own policy framework, then we shall not get a clear picture of where the bottlenecks are. So perhaps that can be covered later by NITAU, maybe internally, perhaps packaged into a policy brief, as someone earlier said. The third is on an area that was mentioned by the presenter on the structures and governance structures that were looked at during the study. And I feel almost every institution has an IT office of some sorts. So this was a soft area to look at. But I think a harder area is for us to establish which institutions have an actual ICT policy institutionalized, and then carry that one into a recommendation on NITAU supporting all those that don't have to immediately start on developing and having one approved. I think that will go a long way in building our internal capacities as government. Very quickly, again, the other is on an area that I feel was missed out. We're talking of the stock of ICT equipment. We have a very big issue of disposal, reuse, recycling, right from the household level to the institutional level. And I think if we don't have certain clear recommendations from this study on how we can deal with that problem of e-waste, first of all, but also how devices can be recycled into the market. I saw we had about 4% access. I think that can be improved. And then lastly, the PDMIS, someone mentioned it earlier, is going to be collecting data quarterly. And I worry about the frequency of this survey. I don't want us to have another one after 4 years. So how can we match this with the PDMIS data collection at the parish level, so that even if it's 5 questions out of this survey, they can also be integrated into that quarterly survey, so that we have a more frequent survey report. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Olanya from the Ministry of ICT. I think those should mark our day. So I hope, Mr. Olanya, you're answering some of these.
No, I just want to thank you. Chair, I want to thank you very much. And members, I'm from the Ministry of ICT itself. I've been part that worked from the planning of this survey up to the launching of the report. We are the final users of this report.
Yeah.
Which this report has given us as learners first the tool we need for evidence-based decision-making, justification for funding for the sector, as well as policy decision. Now, mine is I'm just seeking guidance. the finding confirms some of the things which we have seen. Now, as government, we all know that one of the key interventions under DT is the use of ICT to improve service delivery. As my colleague pointed out, and the finding, there are still many challenges that came out. Cost of internet is still high, cost of handset is high, skill not enough, mindset need to be changed, network coverage. Now, can the consultant maybe guide us how to prioritize some of these challenges so that it helps us in day-to-day, just to do the nitty-gritty of government work. This is a very, very important study, very, very important finding. And then two, I've not read the report, maybe people who are employed, people ask, ICT is one of the sector providing employment. How many people are employed in the ICT sector? What is there a small write-up or finding on that particular aspect only? Because we need to know, we see people dealing ICT software, people dealing in value addition services, mobile money, people dealing hardware. Is that one in the report? I thank the consultant very much.
Well, thank you. Okay, so thank you. Of course, we have our colleagues from the ministry. We have the acting commissioner, policy and planning. Thank you, Sir Fred, for coming. I know some of these questions are directed to you directly in terms of the planning and prioritization of some of these. Let me start off from FITSPA. The issues are around digital skilling and of course, inclusion of the ICT in the curriculum. As NITAU, what we've been working with the National Council for Higher Education in reviewing of course, course content. And that has been one of our contributions to them, to the agency, but also, and of course, through the National Council for Higher Education, it is where all these concerns of what courses needs to be or what course units needs to be constituted in the curriculum. So we support the other agencies in that regard, reviewing those of those course content, but also to the National Council. National Curriculum Development Center. We've also been supporting in terms of ICT and of course entrenching ICT in the courses. But during COVID, we also supported again National Curriculum Development Center with, of course, the Colibri, and I think we have someone, I think, from education here. I think where the Minister of Education. We've been working together to extend some of those services across the country where our learners can access content online. So those are some of the things that we are doing, but you're right, digital skilling, we still have a gap there. And of course, together with the ministry and the sector, our focus, of course, will be this. And this is also coming right from NDP3. Under the Digital Transformation Program, human capital, ICT human capital development is one of our priority as a sector. So we'll focus on that. You talked about the timelines for the implementation of the follow-up project. Of course, we still have some approvals to undertake, but we are hopeful that as if we conclude everything by December, then possibly within the next financial year, we should be starting to implement this project. We've come a long way, and we hope that through the ministry, we can kickstart this project. How are we? The issues of integration, the issue of integration of systems was also raised. How far are we with the integration now that we have the parish development model information system. I must say that the platform is actually ready for integration, and I think NITA is supporting, has been supporting also the development of that PDM-IS system. So the platform is ready. It has been ready since January this year, and I can say we already have about, let me just check my statistics here. We have about 37 government entities, critical government entities that are on the platform. Critical, I'm qualifying it critical because of some of the nature of some of the services. Like for example, you're applying for, say, a passport, and you're able to pay through URA, and it's reflected at NIRA. So that integration is happening, and we have 37 government institutions that have so far been integrated on that platform. But also from the private sector, the banks, we've so far integrated 49 government entities, 49 private sector, and mainly financial institutions from the private sector side. To date, as of yesterday, we have statistics of about 2 million transactions have so far been routed through the platform. So the platform is ready, and for us, as long as the entity is ready with their system, we can integrate. The only challenge we are finding is that some entities that want to integrate onto the platform, their application programming interfaces, some are not ready. So we also support in that regard. But for PDM-IS, I think we are ready, and also we are ready to host the platform as well in the data center. So these are some of the things that we are already fast tracking. Of course, I'll leave some of these other questions to the consultant around equity. Of course, one of the issues that have come up is the rating that needs to be done, the scorecard across government, to see how best can we help those that are still MDAs, but also local governments in terms of prioritizing ICT and where that support is needed. The review of policy and regulatory framework, I must say that we have a report through RSIP, the project that we've just concluded. One of the things that we did was the review of we came up with a study that was undertaken across the sector to review some of these policies. So we have a full report, and we can actually share and where are the issues, where are the gaps in terms of policy, that we have a full report, and the ministry now is taking lead in the review of some of these policies. Some of the policies that we also did review recently with the ministry was the e-waste management policy, and we have a full report also on the baseline. We undertook a baseline survey on the e-waste management. So we have a full report on that, and I think we can put it online, and members, you can have them. We also did review the national ICT policy, of course, an amalgamation of all the other policies within the sector into one. So that exercise has been concluded. So that exercise has also been concluded. I don't know whether I've left out. Yes, there was an issue about 9% of the MDAs that are still maybe getting services from other service providers. We've also come in, one of actually our biggest challenges that sometimes when we take this, we want to connect an entity, but you still find they have a contract, a running contract with, say, another service provider. Sometimes it's until, because that is contractual, sometimes we wait for them to terminate, and then of course we come into connect, but there are not really many. Our focus will, most of the government entities and the agencies, the known ones are already connected, and we are now taking these services to the countryside, the upcountry stations. So that is from my side. The issues of ICT structure, I think had already highlighted this, that the ministry has come up with has come up with the strategy to enhance and sustain the ICT function. And one of the key aspirations in the strategy is to establish that every entity or government entity, be it at local government level, should have a structure, a standard structure of a department of IT to help with all these other issues at that level. The issues of usage of Gmail. Gmail, we are currently rolling out the unified messaging and collaboration system. Of course, this is an emailing platform, a standardized platform for government. So far, we have about 128 government entities that are utilizing these services. Of course, standardizing emailing platform for government and about 20,000 users of around for those that we've provided these services, and it is work in progress. This year we plan to roll out a number of government entities. We have the licenses, and therefore contact us if you still are struggling with using Gmail. We are coming, and let's take your requirements so that we can help you migrate. So I think that is from NITA. I'll leave the rest for the consultant, and maybe one or two for the ministry on the issue of BPO again that has been raised, and then we will definitely conclude our meeting today. But I want to again take this opportunity to thank you all for the comments. May I invite maybe Ali to just highlight a brief highlight on some of those, and so that we are able to move.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you very much, colleagues, for those insightful questions. I think a number of them have been touched on, but I'll just touch on a few here that there was the director from Uganda Police Force talked a little bit about information on cybercrime. There's actually some data in there. I don't think it is as detailed as you might want it. As Tusu indicated, the focus was really on online. So for example, things like the phone we didn't capture, but we do capture within the survey, in the report. We do provide information about the type of online crimes that people have experienced, whether they report them, if they report them, to who do they report them? If they don't report, what's the problem? Why don't they report? So there might be some insight in there, but it has that limitation that the focus is primarily on internet users. So there might be a component that might not be as good as you want. Somebody from Data Care asked a little bit about the relationship between the 2.7% for the households having a computing device and the 5.7% of internet access. Yes, there's some relation, but this is shaped a little bit by the guidelines that we use to run the survey. So for example, for the computing device, the focus was on, it had to be a desktop computer, a laptop computer, or a tablet. So that basically, so if you had any of these or a combination of these, so for example, even if you had all three, we would still count you, that you have access. We count you once, right? Then when we go to internet access, when we get to internet access at the home, even though it's at the household level, it then exceeds the other three devices that we talked about. So it's possible that people have a smartphone and within the household. So they basically use that for internet access. So we count that, even if there are multiple people in the household that might have that, we really count that as still one. So that's why you see that. So there is some relationship, but I think the two parameters are slightly different. I think Richard has addressed the e-government one in terms of services, but we didn't really go down to that level that you are kind of requiring in terms of actually highlighting or elaborating the business processes and figuring out which components of those are actually digitized or digitalized for that matter, and so on and so forth. The question from Patrick from UIA around the maturity levels. So, I mean, people have been talking about data. I think actually, if you have access to this data, there are a whole range of questions in there that you can use as a basis to actually talk about or determine the maturity, however you might see it. For example, I can actually also talk about this. Somebody talked about different kinds of policies. Do they have an ICT policy? So when we were at the MDA level, we actually were even specific. So we would come and we would ask, do you have an ICT policy or master plan or strategy? Then people would give you an answer. Then you would go, do you have an acceptable use policy for ICT resources within the MDA? Then people would say yes or no. Do you have an ICT, disaster recovery, business continuity policy? Then people would give you, so within the report, you can actually see information security. So we would go into elaborate or be a bit specific about this. So I think there are pieces and components. We haven't really done that to kind of determine the maturity level or something, but the bits and pieces I think are there if somebody actually wanted to do that. The recommendation on templates, actually, that's one of the recommendations in there. So if you look at this report at the end of each section, because these different categories are dealt with in sections, there's usually a summary table, at least that highlights the key findings or the key major problem with a particular sector, its implication, and then recommended action. So if you actually wanted to read that report pretty quickly, if you did the executive summary and then went at the end of each section and found that report, you may as well live with a good understanding of it. But one of the recommendations actually is around templates for different kinds of things, whether they are policies, whether there are other kinds of documents that can actually be used as a basis that MDAs use to help themselves progress from one level to another. Somebody asked a little bit around the other 9% of MDAs that don't use NITA-U and why. I don't think there was a specific question to find out why not using NITA-U, but at least I think there are questions in there that might shed light in terms of why people prefer that, but most likely it might actually also be issues with location and things like that, because some of the MDAs that are located in other places that may not necessarily be within reach of the NBI may sometimes have to find their own funding to actually do their own, networks, which might be issues. Issues of challenges of how do we prioritize? I think that came up from a range of people. How do we prioritize priorities? I mean, in terms of, okay, priorities, we have all of these challenges or all of these things we want to do. What do we go with first? So actually at the end of the report, we do provide, it's like I indicated, I highlighted some of those. At the end of each section, you could actually get section or category recommendations, but then we try to build those up into one list at the end of the report where we actually provide some focus areas. It's not prioritized. It might be a list of about 10 priority actions, but didn't go as far as saying, I think out of these 10, maybe this is more important. I think that's something that can actually be done internally. Yeah, people were asking, based on your comparison, have we progressed? Have we regressed? We've actually, the reality is we have progressed when you compare it, at least the data from the 2017-2018 edition and this year, you can actually see steps of progress in whatever categories or areas you actually look at. There's been progress. You briefly touched on the issue of BPOs being marketed domestically. This is, it's something actually we mentioned in one of the recommendations. So, but like I indicated, if you actually go to that link, there's a smaller specific report that focuses just on the BPOs. But this is something that was interesting. So you look at the BPOs, their major market or primary source of work is actually local. But their biggest complaint is still that the people locally are not aware to be able to give them work. So in essence, the issue of actually marketing or creating awareness, both in terms of, hey, these are the kind of capacities we have locally that could address your challenges, need to be addressed, but also on the other side about creating the awareness and the drive that government usually is the biggest employer, and it's also the biggest generator in terms of work, like people have mentioned. And if we can actually, it's difficult for you to go out and market and say, bring work to our BPO sector. Yet you who are here, you have work, but you are not giving it to your BPO sector. What's the catch? So essentially, that's something, and as the commissioner indicated, they are addressing, at least from a policy perspective, they are addressing some of the bottlenecks, like some of those policies and how they be needed to be put in place. I think issue of packaging were dealt with. Somebody talked a little bit about data. Yeah, this is one of those that actually ends up in the actual recommendations. There's a lot of data that we are generating that we are not, even internally, whether it's within organizations. If you start to talk about inter-MDA, then that is even another ballpark, but we have not even started to scratch the surface of what we can be able to do. Somebody gave you a nice example, I think, from data care. And so if only I knew that my driving permit is going to expire, then the kind of things, most likely, for example, if you do comprehensive insurance or something, or you're dealing with the private sector, usually the private sector people will remind you, hey, you know, your sticker is ending in 2 weeks' time. Why? Because essentially they know the implication of that. It is you're going to be able to pay and generate income. And there are lots of opportunities like that people could do that would actually help. Or even simplifying services. We were having a chat with somebody in the morning and was saying, could you imagine if it were easy to generate these PRN things or the things you use to pay and in the bank, whether it's for you or whoever, and it was just as simple as making a phone call. And you could actually generate it on your phone and actually pay from there. Do you know how much that would make life easy in terms of how much revenue that could bring in just by making it that much simpler for people? You may not need to have to create these roadblocks and things where you stop and then check the number plate and things like that, because it's that much easier. Yes, you do the other, but because you've reduced the friction or agency of, or the way of doing some of these things, it would be much easier. Online and elsewhere, there's been a question around e-waste and whether we handled it in here. Yes, there were a couple of questions in there to figure out how people deal with e-waste, but we didn't pay or give it a lot of attention, actually. I think even, I don't know whether in the report it's probably there, but not in the presentation. NITAU actually did a specific study that was done early this year, whose sole focus is just on e-waste. So they've done a whole study like this, and the focus is on e-waste. I don't know whether there's been an opportunity for people to see that, but it does actually address that. So it isn't something that they have ignored. That is something that is there. The other online questions I saw there, people asking, does NITAU offer risk assessments to MDAs? From my discussions with the stakeholders, the answer to that question is yes. But I haven't seen somebody answer it online. But there are certainly issues around, they're helping people understand that they are also having these SATs and, UG SATs, so these entities, specific bodies that are set up to actually monitor security within the environment. And I think they can actually, they do provide that kind of service. IT budgets for local government, I don't think there's much we can do. I think that's been talked about. Yeah, I think, Chusu, you want to address the issue around equity?
Thanks a lot, Ali, and thanks, Willie. So we are getting to the conclusion. Let me say a couple of things before we look at an outstanding questions. The first one, the question about digitizing and digitalizing keeps on coming up. So we should all know that digitizing is converting information or contents of a file and everything to digital form. Then digitalizing is about the holistic process which ensures that the organization is working with everything online. So part of the inputs to that is the digitized information, but the infrastructure, human resource, the enabling environment, all this is part of digitalization. Talking about which, the question about the policy environment, if you look at the National Broadband Baseline Survey and Broadband Blueprint Report, which was done by the ministry under the auspices again of NITAU, it is online. It has got a huge section, actually several sections, about the environment, the policy, the regulations, the laws, and everything. So please refer to that, because everything is converging so that we can then address some of these challenges. Then the other big elephant in the room is about culture. I don't know that Mr. Rossa is still here. I'm going to talk about OPM. Two people in OPM use government addresses. One of them is Mr. Rwasa, the other one is Mr. Roland Taremwa. This is true. I was trying to engage them, we're trying to engage them as part of the National Broadband Baseline Survey. And out of 10 addresses, the rest were Yahoo or Gmail. This is office of the Prime Minister. This is about culture. It's not about technology. It is about deciding to change. When I communicate with the ministry, everybody is now on government email. NITAU, everyone is on government email. You remember, Honorable Kabajo, when we were on the board together, that we decided in the first meeting that we didn't want any more hard copies in the meeting. I hope they haven't come back. Everything is on laptop, and this is 8 years ago. So we sometimes hide behind technology to hide the cultural barriers we are facing in terms of change, because there's no reason why anyone in government could be using a Gmail address. It is so embarrassing, honestly. It's like not having a toilet at home. This is rather embarrassing. So we need to deal with those things. Then the other things that we seem to think in government that ICT is about technology, and it is not. And until that realization comes home, we're going to continue having these challenges. So the people who know the business processes should decide what is happening. They should own the systems. If you have got a car, you don't let your mechanic or driver tell you where to go. You tell them where you want to go, and then they make sure that the car is functioning. That's the role of the technical people. Thirdly, you have policy meetings and everybody sending their IT officer, diploma, whatever, and they are representing the PS, and you say, how can we have change? NPA knows that we have got the Digital Transformation Program Working Group, which was set in place precisely to ensure coordination around the sector so that we move in one direction. But guess what used to happen? They would send the IT officers who don't have anything about policy, who cannot make decisions. And this is why Uganda is not progressing. And our neighbors, whom are not mentioned, not far from here, are making a lot of progress. What are the outstanding questions, Alice? Disability, yes, disability and equity, we did look at this in some depth, not in terms of what needs to be done, but we again know that this is something to which lip service is often given. We know people with disabilities has come a long way because it has got major champions. Women have come a long way, but there are many others, the elderly, the people who are illiterate. Oh, these are disabilities of some kind. There are many factors that we ignore in terms of this penetration. And we think that we are doing very well as a country, but in reality, we have a long way to go. And therefore, the challenge is, I believe, for NITAU through the ministry, to take out those highlights that we are talking about and tell government that this is where we need to start so that we can address these gaps. Things like literacy, internet literacy, technology literacy, all these are barriers that are stopping change. But that real barrier is the cultural change. I think that about covers everything. So colleagues have been permitted by NITAU, because I used to be very closely associated with them, to close this workshop. And thank you, those online and those in person, for coming, your time and your input. So please give the audience a clap as we close. Thank you very much. Thank you, NITAU, and thank you, Minister of ICT and National Guidance. Yes, I understand there's a picture moment here. I don't know about those online, they'll probably be photoshopped in. But if you are here, please do come up for a group photograph if you are still around. And then this will be concluded. I believe somebody from NITAU will take care of how people stand.
I think, yes, for those of us who are here, kindly just come up. We are going to reorganize this place. May I request the camera? Yes.